In this video, we will demonstrate some of the capabilities of the Infoblox plugin for Docker. What you see here on the screens are 4 SSH sessions to 2 Linux VMs. So you can see here I have host 1 and host 2. So I have 2 connections to host 1 and I have 2 connections to host 2. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to load the Infoblox plugin for Docker. And for that, I actually developed a script to load it. But before we run the script, let's take a look at it. So by taking a look at the script, you can see some of the parameters that you have to pass. For example, you need to pass the IP address of the Infoblox grid master, the username, password, and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and run the script. And what this script is going to do is going to load the Infoblox plugin for Docker. And let's go ahead and do the same thing on host 2. So now I have the Infoblox plugin for Docker running on the first Linux host as well as on the second Linux host. So now that the Infoblox Docker plugin is running, let's go ahead and go to the second tab and perform certain operations. So the first thing I'd like to do is I'd like to create a network that will be used for communication between the couple of Docker containers, as you will see shortly. If you go to the NIOS, you can see right now I have a single network created, but I don't want to use this network. I want to use a different network, again, for intercommunication between the Docker containers. So let's take a look at the create network script. And as you can see here, the command actual is docker network create. We're passing a bunch of parameters, including the IP address of the network that I want to use. So 192.168.1.0 and subnet mask 24. And I'm also using extensible attribute. This is the value that I will assign for this particular network, as you will see shortly in the demo. So let's go ahead and run this script to create the network, and let's see what happens. And as you can see here, the network was created successfully. So let's go to NIOS, do a refresh, and you can see the network was created successfully. Now, if I do Docker network list, you will see the net1 is created, and that's basically the name that we gave it. So that's the first step I'm going to do. And if you go inside the network, you will see there are no IP addresses currently assigned. So now I'm ready to go ahead and launch a container. And for that, I also have another script. And this script basically runs a Docker container. So let's go ahead and run it. And as soon as the Docker container runs, it will grab an IP address from the Infoblox appliance. So it will grab the first available IP address, which is 192.168.1.1. So let's go ahead and run it. And if you type ifconfig, you will see we received 192.168.1.1. So let's do a refresh. And you can see the IP address of the Docker container has been assigned by Infoblox. So now let's go to the second Linux host and do the same thing, except we've already created the network. We don't have to create it again, so we can just simply run the container. And now, within a few seconds, it will execute, and if I type ifconfig, it will grab the next available IP address, which is 192.168.1.2. So if I do a refresh, you will see that the IP address has been allocated for the particular VM. So let's test it out. So let's go ahead and ping 192.168.1.1, which is the remote container, and you can see it's completing successfully. So now if I go ahead and exit, it will automatically release the IP address 192.168.1.2. So let's go ahead and click on exit, give it a few seconds, and if I do a refresh, you will notice 192.168.1.2 disappeared, was released. And if I do the same thing on the second one, and I do a refresh, you will see, again, it was released. And similarly, if I run it one more time, within a couple of seconds, the IP address will be assigned. And if I do the same thing on the second host, again, within a few seconds, it will be automatically assigned. Now, before we wrap this up, there are a couple of things I'd like to show you. Is if you go back to the network, and if I select this network, and I click on extensible attributes, you will see there are a bunch of extensible attributes assigned to this network, including the network name, as you can see here, with the value -net1. Now, if you recall, when we created the network, actually, let me exit the container and go to create network. You will see network name equal net1, and again, this is the extensible attribute that we assigned, and we basically assigned to the specific network. The other thing I'd like to show you is if you click on the Cloud tab, assuming you have the Cloud Network Automation license installed on the Gridmaster, you will get to see the management platform. In this case, is Docker, and you get to see the actual Docker instances allocated. So if I go ahead now and run the Docker container again, and I do a refresh, you will see the second IP address automatically visible. So as you can see, it's very straightforward to create a network, create Docker containers, assign them IP addresses, all using the Infoblox plugin for Docker.